All right, so we're back here again, talking a little bit about our first correlate that we'll kind of explore. So we'll start off with, and this is, maybe it would help if I turn my pin on. Rookie mistake, don't be like me. All right, so we talked about age, right? So when we think about age, right, we'll just like be clear, right? We're talking about like how old someone is. You know, this isn't aging meat or aging like a wine or anything like this, but we're looking at how old someone is. And so, just as like a little important note to keep in mind, right, is that this is something that is bounded. So we know that people in general, right, you know, they are, depending on your point of view, we'll say they're at age 0 and they can go until like death, right? And, you know, we know that people can live up to, I think what's the oldest person? We're going to call 125, right? But in terms of the criminal justice system, but in the CJ system, one is culpable. So culpability. So when you are, you know, responsible for actions, for your own actions, is typically, you know, we'll say in most states there's some variation. We'll say 10 years old, right? Now, whether you agree with that age or not is irrelevant, but we're just using this as a starting point, right? You can learn more about, you know, like age and crime, because there's some states it's like, I think it's like age 6 you could become culpable or stuff like that. But typically age 10, this is when we start believing that kids are responsible for their crimes, right? So we'll use that as a breaking point, as a, like sort of a starting point for our discussion. For those of you who want to know more about this, I would encourage you to take a juvenile delinquency class. I believe Dr. Norris in the Department of Criminal Justice teaches this. So anyway, so when we start talking about this, we think about age, right? So we kind of led off this video talking about like a pattern, right? So when we think about a pattern of crime, right? So we'll do this as a graph, right? So we'll say 10. And again, we only pick 10, you know, mainly because that's when, you know, you can start being culpable for your crimes. You can be processed through the criminal justice system. And we'll call this, I don't know, we'll call it like 75, right? Or something like that. There's this unique pattern that comes up, right? And again, when we talk about patterns, right, this is something that doesn't have to be there. It doesn't have to exist. So what we end up finding, right, we'll say this is not to scale, so don't at me. We'll say this is 15, right? We start seeing that there's kind of like this huge spike in crime that kind of tails off, right? And so what we tend to find, right, we'll call this, we'll call it 25, right, 25-ish or something like this. This is, again, an approximation. Don't at me. I know the graph is not scaled correctly, right? But what we end up finding is that in this colored space right here that I'm doing right now is that most crime occurs right here. So the little important note is that most crime happens here in this age group. Now, the important thing that's really like kind of like weird about this and kind of like odd about it is that, you know, we know that this is a known pattern. But at the same time, right, and this is something that is replicated. So we see this over and over and over and over again across time, space, so the country that you live in, the culture that you live in, time, space, country. We have a very similar pattern. Where we see people offend over and over again, right? Where we tend to see, like, you know, we look back at this graph, right? These younger people right here tend to commit most crime, right? Yet at the same time, right, around about this age of onset, as we talked about, we'll say it's like right here. We'll call it 14, even though it's not, because it's not the scale. 14 until about here, right, what is sometimes called as like an age of desistance, or a general pattern, is that we see most of the fending occurring here, right? And we find that these are like sort of like it's this recurring pattern for a lot of, typical street crime, right? Where we see most crimes are being committed by people in this age group. And so big question is, why are teen to young adult people responsible for most crime? Because it does not have to be this way, right? This is a pattern, and it's not random. If it was like, let's say, just for illustration purposes, right? So if we did our age graph again, we saw that this was 10 and this is, 125 or whatever age, right? If it was like you had an equal chance of doing it, right, of like being convicted of crime, it'd be uniform, right? A uniform probability, which is an actual thing. You can look it up if you'd like. And it would look sort of like that, right? Where everyone has an equal chance, it all like kind of balances out. And that is clearly not the case like in this graph, because most of it is lumped in over here. So this begs the question then, right? From a theoretical standpoint, from a practical standpoint, is why are younger people most at risk for committing crime? This would actually be a really good discussion question. Like if you guys did on the pack kind of assignment, a discussion board is just kind of talk about explore why is some of the case, right? Why is this the case? Because it does not have to be, and that is a really big take-home message of correlates of crimes, that we have these known patterns, right? And something that is persistent, it always pops up. Why is that the case, right? So like a theory then. And when we think about theories, and this is something that you should kind of hold on in the back of your mind, is how does an explanation or theory explain age as a correlate of crime? So that's the big sort of question you should ask yourself. So when we look at different theories that come into place, you should think to yourself, how would the theory explain this correlate of crime? So with that, we'll kind of pause this video, and then we'll kind of continue this in the next one.